Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Board to order. My name is Paula Clark. I chair the Planning Board, and this evening we have two hearings. The first is the application of the Baudos on Maranacook Lake for a reconstruction of an existing cottage in the shoreland residential zone. And secondly, is the application of Safe Space Meeting House for a community center club. We don't know precisely how long the first application will take, but we will move into the second hearing just as soon as possible. So my understanding is that we have Mr. Baudo on Zoom this evening. And I would to refresh everyone's memory, this is a continuation of a public hearing that we had opened on October 14th of last year. Over the winter, the plan for the cottage replacement was revised. The planning board reviewed additional information from the applicant. We had a number of questions and information requests for the applicant, and a lot of additional information was provided, including a revised site plan and a revised erosion and sedimentation control plan. We initially considered that new information on July 27th, and the most recent submittals, again, were the revised site plan and the erosion and sedimentation control plan. What I'd like to do first is ask the applicant to provide a brief summary for those of you in attendance for this application. We have talked about it before, and so we're really looking for a brief summary, just a couple of minutes. And I'd ask for a particular focus on the new information that was submitted on the revised site plan and the erosion and sedimentation control plan. The planning board may have some questions of Mr. Baudo, and then we'll move to open it to public comment if there are any parties that would like to make any comment about the application. So with that, Mr. Baudo, if you could provide a summary, we would appreciate that.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as you mentioned, we made application to rebuild our camp of 40 years last year. And I believe it was in October. I had received an email probably from the October planning board meeting via Jamie Hansen, who was the CEO at that time, with 5 questions, mostly pertaining to the site plan, the erosion control, the stormwater management plan. At that time, we provided, over the winter, we provided the town of Readfield a detailed survey and a detailed engineering plan that addressed the 5 issues or the 5 questions that the planning board and the town of Readfield had presented at that time. The latest was, the latest meeting was in July. We addressed these questions, presented the plan. There were 2 additional questions, or hopefully final questions. I had spoken with Bill Monagle. The engineer originally had put straw bales and silt fence on the plan. It sounded as if the preferred measure was the hay bales, which was originally on the plan, and to change the silt fence to an erosion control mix. So soon thereafter, after the July meeting, we revised the silt fence to erosion control mix, and that's on the newest plan. And then the other question, I think, came from Jack. And it was just kind of a more of a computation and an outline of the square footage, which I provided with Chip Stevens. And that's basically where we're at.
Are there any questions that planning board members have at this point?
I have a question.
Again, Jack.
Should I ask it now?
Yes, go ahead.
So I looked at what the engineer came up with, and it sounds comprehensive, and I'm wondering who's actually going to supervise things to make sure it's done in compliance with what the engineer has set forth. And it seems, from what I can tell, it's pretty detailed steps, temporary and permanent measures and steps that have to be taken. And I'm just wondering, is the engineer going to oversee this, or who's going to oversee this?
No, sir. So I believe on the second page, so the first page shows the site plan and a diagram with the drawings, et cetera. And in speaking with Bill, the engineer, it's basically you put the measures in place. I would assume Chip Stevens, during his inspection process, he's not held responsible for that, but he could say, okay, there's erosion control mix in place, there's hay bales in place. But in the notes on the second page, it says that particularly, and Bill Monagle from Cobbessy Watershed kind of confirmed this, that he just, I think once they're in place, it's not like, okay, we're good to go and we don't have to pay attention to this. It's more of if we have a big storm event that, that is monitored, during or soon thereafter. We are hiring a local contractor that's literally right up the street. So it would be something that we would call on him to say, okay, there's been a big 1 or 2 inch storm. Can you just go down and make sure that, the measures are in place? And of course, they'll be working there as well. So, the upkeep of that would fall on him as well.
Jack, did you want to comment on that further?
No.
Well, I've got it on here if you want to be able to hear better.
Bonnie, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Other planning board members, any questions at this point of Mr. Bowdell? Are there any interested parties, abutters, Readfield residents, other interested parties who would like to comment on the application at this point? Yes, sir.
Interested parties. My name is Tom Wilson. I'm the butter. We've been neighbors for 20 years. Went through the same process about 10 years ago, replacing my camp. So I've tracked this process since last fall. It's been a long time. I know they're anxiously going. It seems to me that I looked at the plans, I looked at his mitigation for the safety of the lake and all that. He's planning to build a smaller camp than the current one, farther back from the lake than the current one. The drawings and the engineering plans all look, I'm not an engineer, but they look in order to me and are easy to understand. And we're very supportive of his desire to replace this camp, which looks like it could actually fall down anytime. And It would be a shame if he couldn't get this wrapped up very quickly now. He's already been, a year in the process, and I know that they have challenges with insurance and all that on the current camp. So I think from my perspective and my knowledge of our neighbors, everybody's delighted to see a new camp go in there. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Charles Weaver from 3 Colony Road. I'm also in a butter on the other side from Mr. Wilson. This has been in process for a long time, obviously, and hopefully it'll be brought to a close tonight. I also serve as president of the Dixon Camp Road Association, which constitutes 18 properties down on Colony Road and on Lazy Loon Shores, or Lazy Loon Road. When we had our annual meeting this past earlier this month, there was a lot of informal discussion went along about this. And I think to a person, well, I'll take that back. There was one person who wasn't there and I haven't talked with, but they were all in favor of moving ahead with it. They've tried to keep this place up to snuff in there. It's at the point now where the floors have gone. There's a number of things that have gone wrong with it. And they want to get it cleaned out. They want to take it taken care of and get a nice new fresh start in there. I hope that you will look favorably upon it. I know I've known this young gentleman since he was that tall. I found him to be a honest and upright citizen. He's been coming to this camp for many, many years down here. So it's the family's owned that cottage since I think 1974 or 5. So if they're not newies to the neighborhood, and I would hope that you would look favorably on their application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any others that would like to comment on the Baudo application? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to close the hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the hearing. Any discussion? All right. Because we have several planning board members here in person, but we also have a member participating by Zoom, I'll call a roll call vote. Don?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Jan? Yes. Jack?
Yes.
And Paula, yes. Okay. The hearing is closed. So the two issues that we had remaining before us, as I recall from earlier meetings, were the matter of the specifics of the erosion and sedimentation control plan, and also the questions and discussion around the revised site plan, distances, the square footages, and so forth. I think the revised site plan helped a great deal with that. I think it clarified some questions that planning board members had. But I do recall that there were a couple of issues about the erosion control plan that we probably need to talk about a little bit more. And there may be other issues that you want to raise. If you want to put those on the table at this point, we can discuss those as well. So why don't we begin with the erosion and sedimentation control issue? Jack had raised the question of inspection and how it was going to be confirmed that the erosion control measures were in place as required by the plan. And Bill Monagle and Don had raised the issue of the specific measures that would be taken. And that was the discussion around silt fence, hay bales, and erosion control mix. And I know, Don, that you have some thoughts about that if you want to begin.
Yeah, I just to start off, I think this is a much improved plan. So I applaud Mr. Waldo for the revisions that have been made, the additional drawings. I think the erosion control program is a much more effective approach. Particularly more in the land there. So I would be in favor of some of that. I think the one thing I would consider as planning board would be just require that burn be in place and inspected prior to the.
You had talked about erosion control mix previously in lieu of silt fence. As I recall, there silt fence and hay bales and erosion control mix are on the plan at this point.
Silt fence has been removed in place of erosion control.
Has it been removed? Okay.
And on the meeting, of questions that you'd asked prior was that you would wanted 2 of 3 preferred measures, which was a 36-inch wide by 12-inch high berm of erosion control mix, which has now been added to the plan in place of the silt fence. Another option was an EC sock, which is an erosion control sock. That is not on the plan as we only need 2 of the 3 measures. And then C is a row of staked hay bales, which is on the engineered plan. So that would be 2 of the 3 measures requested by the planning board and the town of Readfield.
Okay. Thank you. Jack or Don or anyone else, what are your thoughts around inspection of the erosion control structures? I think we have several different options. Certainly, Chip would be able to check on those. I believe that Bill Monagle had specifically suggested that the contractor do a check after significant rain events. My thought was that perhaps we could also have the contractor do a final check to see that things are in place at some appropriate point, perhaps prior to construction of the cottage. With a final check by Chip. Jack, did you have other thoughts about that?
No, just before the certificate of occupancy was issued, that we make sure that all the measures are in place.
Wouldn't we want them in place during construction though? I think that's most of the point.
Right.
So
Yeah,
perhaps prior to the building permit.
Yeah, and on the plan, it makes a statement that the measures are put in place before significant construction and or dirt work is done. So it should be in place prior to construction and throughout.
So could Chip do that?
So would that work for you, Chip, if
Works
we
fine with me.
required prior to issuance of the building permit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then prior to the issuance of the occupancy permit, that the permanent measures are in place, right?
Prior to the building.
After the building.
Oh, I think those measures primarily go in place in anticipation of construction.
And they're permanent at that point?
So again, before significant construction is started, you put those measures in place. It's more of a erosion control, stormwater management, and then additionally, once the construction is completed, those measures are removed, and then there's storm drains, French drains, whatever you'd like to call them, that are again part of the plan, that are then supposed to take rainwater from the structure and permeate that kind of through the soils so that we don't get, runoff after the structure is built.
So do the hay bales get removed once those measures are in place?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And those permanent measures are part of your construction plan.
Yes, they are. And they're on the drawing.
So before the building permit's issued, the temporary measures would have to be in place, and before the certificate of occupancy is issued, the permanent measures would have to be in place.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
That's what it says in the ordinance.
In what? In the,
It says that it must be substantially complete prior to the issuance of certificate of
yeah,
occupancy.
okay.
You're reading from the, what are you reading from, Henry?
Just the erosion control section of the second criteria.
Yeah, okay. So the site review provisions require prior to the
Substantial, permanent erosion control measures must be substantially complete prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. That makes sense.
okay.
Or as a condition of the certificate of occupancy.
Okay, so temporary in place prior to the issuance of the building permit, permanent in place prior to the issuance of the occupancy certificate.
Correct.
And what would we say about ongoing inspection after that? It's part of the standard conditions in a way.
There's a note in there that the contractor will inspect. And again, you're going to have a contractor and a code enforcement officer, collaborating on the project and making sure things are being done up to spec. And again, I think Chip has offered, I can speak with Chip, but Chip and the contractor would work together again to make sure those measures are in place. The upkeep is there, and that prior to occupancy, that the permanent measures are put in place. And of course, there'll be a little bit of transition. Probably the permanent measures will be put in place when the backfill and the dirt work and stuff is done. So permanent measures will probably be done well in advance of a certificate of occupancy or substantial completion.
Hey,
Go ahead, Henry.
I was just going to read the sentence here. It's also part of the state criteria as well, but the town's ordinance specifically says a certified contractor must be on site each day earth moving activities occur and for a sufficient duration to ensure the proper implementation of the plans. So, I think we're saying the same thing, and it's also part of the ordinance. So.
And Bill Monagle specific recommendation from Cobussy Watershed was that the contractor also specifically inspect after any significant rain event. So that is, another layer of inspection after rain events. So planning board members, anything more on that or other issues? Jack, anything else?
No.
Okay. If that's the case, I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the plans subject to the revised engineering plans and water mitigation, runoff mitigation with the code enforcement officer and the contractor working together to make sure the runoff into the lake doesn't happen and that the water mitigation plans are in place and remain in place.
Is there a second? Was that you, Jeff?
I was saying standard conditions also.
Okay. Plus standard conditions of approval.
Conditions of approval.
Is there a second? A second. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. John?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Jan? Yes. Jack?
Yes.
Paula, yes. Okay. Mr. Bauda, thank you very much for your work on this, for responding to all our questions and information requests. We very much appreciate it. And we are finished with our process and your project's approved. So again, thank you very much. And you can get in touch with Chip about steps, from this point and getting your building permit in place and so forth. And we'll also be issuing a written decision from the planning board as well.
Okay, thanks again for all your help, and I appreciate everyone's time, consideration, and I look forward to working with the town of Readfield and Chip Stevens and continuing our history in Readfield, Maine. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. Good luck.
All right, take care.
So our second hearing this evening concerns the application of the Safe Space Meeting House. Specifically, we're here to conduct a public hearing on that application. The application seeks to change the use of the property at 26 Mill Stream Road from single-family residential to community center club. The property in question is located in the rural residential district per the town's zoning and tax maps. Briefly, a reminder of the history, the procedural history where we are with this application. The application was originally submitted by Safe Space in August of 2020, but was found to be incomplete at that point and was not considered by the planning board at that time. The code enforcement officer had sent a letter detailing the deficiencies that he identified in the application and requesting additional information. Certain information was provided subsequently, and the planning board was able to consider the application on May 25th and again on June 2nd. At that June 2nd meeting, the planning board determined the application to be complete in that it met basic submission requirements. There still was a lengthy list of questions and information needs that the planning board put forward and required to be addressed before we could schedule this public hearing. A supplemental information was provided by the applicant in July, and the planning board initially reviewed that information late in July. Subsequently, the site visit, which was held last night, and the public hearing, tonight's public hearing, were scheduled. Before we open the public hearing and invite you to speak and comment on the application, I'd like to make a few comments about where we are procedurally with this application, how the hearing will be conducted, and the planning board's expectations for the hearing. First, I do think it's important to be clear at the outset that this is not a hearing concerning whether the town favors or supports a community center or club. And the planning board will not be passing judgment or making any decision about that particular point. This hearing and the proceeding before the planning board at this time are strictly about whether the application meets the standards and the requirements of Readfield's land use ordinance. It is not about whether individuals or the town collectively favor the idea of a community center in town. Now, obviously, there have been some strong opinions expressed about this application in both directions. We definitely want to hear from everyone and allow you an opportunity to comment on the application, but we are asking for your support and cooperation in a couple of different areas. First, and very importantly, we're asking that everyone's comments be respectful and maintain a civil tone. I think that that's an expectation that is pretty basic, and we expect that of all the public meetings in town. Secondly, we've asked that you try to be succinct with regard to your comments and try not to be repetitious. We have a number of people, it's not clear to me exactly how many at this point, but there are a number of people who would like to speak, and we want to ensure that there's enough time to provide opportunity for everyone. If a speaker before you has detailed a point that you would also like to raise and that you agree with, you can refer to that speaker's comment rather than repeating all of the details. Finally, please try to provide comments that are relevant to the planning board's review of the application. That is relevant to the standards and requirements of the land use ordinance. To the extent that you might have factual questions, and I'm thinking about questions that might be necessary to your understanding of the application. They may be allowed through the chair, through me, if you have those questions. If you have questions that are more substantive, that you think, for instance, should be considered by the planning board as we move through our deliberative process, you can raise those questions in your comments, and we will make note of those and be sure that the planning board considers them as part of your comments. But I do need to stress that the planning board will not be deliberating on the application this evening, and we will not be making a decision at this point. So tentatively, we expect to begin deliberation at a regularly scheduled meeting, likely later in September, possibly on the 28th, but that will be announced formally at some point later on. I do want to assure you that the planning board will consider each and every comment that we receive at this hearing, whether you make your comments verbally or in writing. There's a lot of information to review, and one of our considerations is to ensure that planning board members have sufficient time to review and thoughtfully consider all of it. And that's one of the reasons I know a number of you have asked about whether there will be a decision tonight. Part of the reason that we do not make an immediate decision is that planning board members, particularly on an application with as much information attendant to it as this one has, that we need to have sufficient time for that review, that thoughtful review. Getting to the mechanics of the process tonight, for those of you attending in person, there was a sign-up sheet by the door. If any of you have not signed in, please come and get the sheet and do so, because I will be using this list to call you in turn to speak. Those of you that are participating via Zoom, what we would like for you to do, if you wish to speak at the public hearing and to provide comment, we would ask that you send an email to the code enforcement officer now, and he will be keeping track of the list of parties that would like to speak via Zoom. And the email address that you need to send to is CEO@Readfield, Maine, all one word, .org. And please provide your name and your address. Again, CEO@readfieldmaine.org. And we will add you to the list of speakers. Although we won't be running a clock technically, I would like to request that you limit your comments to 3 or 4 minutes at this point. If there are additional points that you feel you didn't have time to raise, we'll see what it looks like at the end. It may be possible to ask you back up if you would like to provide more comment. However, we do intend to leave the record open for additional written comment until the 7th of September, which is a Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So I would encourage you to feel free to use that opportunity to either confirm any verbal comments you make tonight and or to provide additional comment if you'd like to do that. And those comments can be sent to the address that I just provided for the code enforcement officer. If anyone has any questions about the process that we're going to use tonight, what we will be covering and not covering, I'd invite you to ask those questions at this point. Okay, seeing none, if something comes up, please feel free to let us know if you have a question as we move through the hearing. So at this point, I would open the hearing on the application. We would ask first for a brief summary from the applicant. And again, very brief, touching on the highlights, just so that everyone in attendance at the hearing has the basic information moving forward with the content of the application. Following that, we will have a statement from the Readfield Town Manager. And then next we'll move to comments from the general public, beginning with any abutters to the property that would like to provide comment. So with that, I would turn to the applicant for a summary.
Thank you. I'm Jed Davis, and I'm the lawyer for Safe Space Meeting House. I also was the town manager here for about 15 years, starting in 1973. So I know this town well, and I am fond of this town. I spent a lot of time here, and it's a great town. I've had a lot of experience with small towns in Maine, and Readfield is one of the better ones.
Jed, could I ask you to speak into the mic a little more? Because
Sure.
I think some of us are having some difficulty hearing you, and I'm not certain about the Zoom participants.
Absolutely. And also, I've lived in Fayette for 25 years. I was the town manager there for a while, and I've been the chair of the planning board there for a long time. And so I realize that this is a complicated application. We're talking about an application for a community house in a residential zone. the land use ordinance is what controls what's allowed in any town, and your land use ordinance allows community houses in the rural residential zone. So as Ms. Clark pointed out, the issue is, does this application meet the requirements of your ordinance? I would like just briefly to go over part of the mission statement of the Safe Space Meeting House, which will help explain why I think that this project would be a wonderful addition to this town. The Safe Space Meeting House is a public benefit, nonprofit corporation and shall be operated for rural and residential interests consonant with the Readfield Land Use Ordinance. It will also be operated for charitable purposes within the meaning of the State of Maine Public Benefit Nonprofit Charter. We support inclusivity, equality, community, and the fundamental rights of all human beings. Readfield's Safe Space Meeting House will provide a space for LGBTQ plus community to build professional and social connections in the community. Our effort intends to establish a meetup space. It will be a safe setting in which to share cultural interests, resources, and opportunities with people who share similar interests and concerns. Our society is beset with uncertainty and anxiety. Readfield's Safe Space Meeting House is dedicated to providing community resources needed to help support LGBTQ plus community in Readfield. We advocate for laws and policies that will protect all people's rights and everyone's dignity. We work for a world where all people can enjoy their rights fully. And I would now invite Leah Hayes to say a few words. She and Alex Twarog are the ones who are running the Safe Space meeting.
Hi, my name's Leah Hayes, and I just have less than 3 minutes here. So I wrote something about why SSMH wants a community center in Readfield and what our plans are. So we want a community center because our kids, our friends, and our neighbors need it. Readfield is the hub of our surrounding communities, and there isn't a place where all walks of life can meet and connect. You asked what we will do at our community center. We are a club for the LGBTQ and allies and all minorities in this community. We'd like to do what other community centers do. Sing together, dance together, make music together, have a contra dance, a potluck, chem-free nights for our kids, things like that. We all need a place to come together and connect in camaraderie, cooperation, instead of fear and division. We need a place where we can come to know our community members. We don't currently know each other. I recently spoke to a couple who are relatively new to the area, and they don't know anyone, and they don't know how to meet them. They don't feel comfortable in a church, and they don't have young kids. They were going to speak tonight, but they decided not to out of fear that they'll be seen as opposing the town by speaking for the barn and SSMH. They don't oppose the town. On the contrary, they'd like to get to know them and for the town to know them. They want to eventually renovate, and they've heard the stories about other homeowners who, like us, have been held up for a year or more in process with the town. A town exists and is built for its people. We'd like to create that space where we can all come together in a spirit of connection and get to know each other, appreciate each other, learn from, and help each other. It's been a hard year for everyone. Isolation and divisions have made it all so much harder. We have to find ways to be there for each other, all the members of our community, and we can't do that if we never meet each other. So we'd like to have dancing, singing, free croissants with homemade jam on a Sunday morning, holiday gatherings, all reasons to come together and know each other and dismantle the margins dividing our society and invite everyone in. We need a place, and we believe that this is that place. We only plan to do the things that other community centers do. If we have an idea that is outside the norm, we will ask permission first. If there's anything you'd like SSMH and its members not to do, please let us know. We in no way aim to be disruptive and imagine nothing of the sort will occur outside what you find at other existing places, such as the Readfield Meeting House. We've modeled much of our ideas on the operations of the Meeting House. We aim to meet each question, each concern that any neighbor may have about our intentions with respect and cooperation. If you'd like us to make sure that we end the music at night at 9:30, we're amenable to that. If one of our lights is shining in your yard, we'll move it. We do not want to offend or disrupt anyone. We want to invite everyone in and alienate no one.
Thank you. Planning board members have any questions of either Jed or Leah? Thank you for that. And at this point, I would ask Eric to come up, please.
Thank you, Paul. Eric Dyer, Readfield Town Manager. The potential for a community center and club at 26 Mill Stream Road has both direct and indirect impacts on multiple municipal properties and roadways. The proposed uses also have impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, taxation, and land use
Eric,
generally.
is it possible for you to get any closer to that mic?
I'll see if I can. Is that better? I don't want to look like I'm slouching, but I'm. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, then I'll just speak more loudly. I'll try that. Mill Stream Road will have, will be directed, excuse me, where was I? Mill Stream Road will be directly affected by the proposed changes, as will the intersections with Sturdivant Hill Road, Giles Road, and Route 17. The two affected municipal-owned parcels are located at map 120, lot 14 and 16. The town of Readfield has a vested interest in considering, there we go, the impacts of this application from two perspectives. First, as the stewards of municipally owned land and infrastructure, and more broadly as the entity responsible for developing and enforcing land use regulations throughout the municipality. I am responding to this proposed application and uses as the town manager, road commissioner, and as a trained planner. And this statement truly is about the uses and not the vision that's being presented. It's about the impacts. And I just want to make that clear before I begin. In 2018, an application for a community center club was received for activities at 26 Mill Stream and was reviewed and considered by the planning board. The current application by the Safe Space Meeting House, SSMH, is for the same property and proposes nearly identical uses and impacts. The application was denied, and I believe that the application before the planning board currently should be denied for similar reasons. In 2018, the application for the zoning change for the property at 26 Mill Stream came before the planning board and was presented in part by one of the co-applicants from the Safe Space Meeting House. Many of the same issues, including the desire and intent to build a community center, were at play. This issue speaks to the global compatibility of community centers and similar activities with respect to the rural residential zone. And that's something we've heard before. I have included, my comments on that review from 2018 with this submittal, which I will be providing via email to the planning board and code officer tomorrow. The change in zoning was denied, and I believe that given the similarities and some of the same issues that are present globally, this application should be denied for some of those reasons as well. The current application seeks approval for a broadly defined community center under a definition that is much narrower than what is being presented in the scope of activities and uses. The property itself has also been designed and purpose-built with the intent of holding large gatherings and events. The property has been manipulated to the point where it no longer has an occupancy permit and is itself a major risk factor for future misuse of the property by any renter, owner, or applicant. And so I believe that if any consideration is given to this, that significant changes be made to that physical structure to prevent the building from being misused in the way it was designed to be used. Okay, so that's another reason I believe that this application ought not to be approved. The definition of community center club is not terribly clear in some respects, but that does not allow for questionable activities to take place. In fact, it requires the planning board look at the context of the rural residential zone as a whole, and also more closely at the specific issues and uses being requested. The rural residential zone does not allow the following uses: indoor theater activities. That includes singing and dancing, unfortunately. It doesn't allow restaurants and bars, large food service activities. The commercial recreation is not allowed, including health centers and gymnasiums and office space. But one of the most important points is that civic convention centers are not allowed, and that is a building or complex of buildings that houses town offices and services, and which may include cultural, recreational, athletic, convention, and entertainment facilities owned and operated by a government entity. That last point is very important because it shows that public, and I quote, cultural, recreational, athletic, convention, and entertainment facilities are not permitted in the rural residential zone. And by extension, similarly, private-owned facilities offering similar services should not be allowed as well, as they have the same impacts as those type of facilities offered by a municipal entity. Ultimately, breaking up components of the above listed items or including them under the umbrella of a nonprofit agency doesn't change their status. It doesn't make them allowable just because of the nonprofit component that's being proposed. The planning board must consider the fact that uses under this application are not reviewed on whether they are for-profit or nonprofit, but whether they are, and I quote, not engaged in activities customarily carried out by a business or for pecuniary gain, as called out in the community center club definition. Fundraising activity is carried out for pecuniary gain. Having classes and other activities customarily carried out by businesses such as yoga, and those type of activities are also pretty self-explanatory. They're just not allowed under the land use ordinance. Those items are clearly not permitted under the community center club definition. They are specifically excluded because of their impact on the neighborhoods and surrounding areas, and the impacts include traffic, noise, and other nuisance. The rural residential zone is here to maintain a quiet quality of life and character for the community. And community centers of this size, scope, just don't belong in that area. And not because of the status of the applicant or whoever is trying to promote them. They're just not allowed. The application submitted to the planning board is lacking in detail around critically important questions such as the actual number of users of the facility, the type of uses, and the parking situation. Information provided around the parking area has been demonstrably false in some cases and questionable in others. I just don't have a lot of confidence in many of the responses that have been provided. I find it concerning that the planning board continues to receive vague and one-line answers to questions of great import but the applicant submitted a multi-page rebuttal to public comment received from a resident within a few days of receipt. That to me shows a mismatch of priorities. The truth is that this issue is a square peg in a round hole. I applaud the vision. I support the idea of community. We all do. We all want to see these things happen. It would be wonderful to have additional resources like this in our community. Unfortunately, the location that has been custom built for this purpose isn't the right one. And I recommend, for those reasons, and for the fact that these uses that are being proposed are inconsistent with both the rural residential zone and the specific definition of a community center and club, that the planning board not approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Planning board members have any questions for Eric?
I had a question.
Jack?
Eric,
Jack has a hand.
in your capacity as road commissioner, is there an issue regarding the current condition of the road and its proposed use?
Absolutely. It's a dirt road. It has no significant base. We've done gravel work on it periodically. It turns into a quagmire in the spring. It's not built for the kind of activity that's being proposed. And I had similar sentiments and feelings when the land use change was being proposed back in 2018. The road condition has not improved since then, I can tell you that. And there are also grave concerns about traffic and parking on Route 17. This DOT did not and has not and would not allow parking on a 45 to 50 mile an hour section of roadway in an area of transition at a 5-corner intersection. It's just a really bad idea. And I completely stand behind that position that parking on Route 17 is not a viable option. I also question whether, as the fire chief does, that it's not viable on route or on Mill Stream either. So the parking situation is a big concern, but really more to my concern, it's about the uses that are being proposed.
Thank you. Any other questions? We are not going to get into debate and rebuttal this evening. Comments are provided. There are a variety of ways that you can respond, but I don't want to use the time available to us tonight in rebutting comments and back and forth exchange on comments that are made. I'd like to turn now to interested parties who have comment on the application. And as I mentioned, I'd like to go first to any abutters who would like to provide comment. And I believe Will Harris would like to provide comment. Call you up first, Will.
Good evening, all. My name's Will Harris, and I live with my wife Bonnie at 26 Old Kents Hill Road. Our property abuts the property at 26 Mill Stream Road, which is the property in question. I come here tonight once again to express my opposition to permitting a public use of the Robert Vitar property at 26 Mill Stream Road. This property was and continues to be zoned rural residential in the Readfield Land Use Ordinance. Mr. Vitar has sought since 2013 to develop the property as a bar, music venue, despite its location in the rural residential location. He has sought unsuccessfully to have the area rezoned to accommodate the intended use. It was not rezoned. sought several times to portray the usage as some kind of community center or club in order to include its intended use within the rural residential zone designation. And I'll just go over a few. In 2015, he called it the Readfield Country Club. That was an application. 2018, set up a nonprofit called the Music and Arts Coalition of Maine at 26 Millstream Road, at which, among other things, they would sell products, food, and rent space for facility for events. Now in 2020 and 2021, you've been presented with the opportunity to permit the same types of activities under this title of Safe Space Meeting House. At least for the last two permit attempts, you're being asked to overlook the fact that Mr. Bitar, on July 18, 2017, signed a consent agreement with the town of Readfield that stated that 26 Millstream would only, and it only was all in capitals, only be used as a single-family dwelling. It has never been used as a single-family dwelling. It was not built to be a single-family dwelling, but that's what the consent agreement said. I haven't read the consent agreement several times. I can't find anywhere in it that it's time limited. So has the agreement run out, or do its terms still stand? Does the fact that the permit request before you state that it's brought by Safe Space Meeting House, and not Bob Bitar, mean that he no longer has to abide by the agreement that he signed, even though he still owns and controls the property? Mr. Bitar was denied an occupancy permit, as has been stated, in large part because he did not abide by the terms of the consent agreement. Should a shell organization be permitted to do was be denied to the owner of the property? That's a question. As an abutter within the rural residential zone, I believe that I am entitled to the protection and restrictions of that zone. I am entitled to the quiet enjoyment of my property, and I look to you on the planning board to help me protect those rights. If you approve this project, which is essentially the same one you presented with many times since 2013, it will mean significant increases in noise and traffic, both adversely affecting my property, and the questions regarding the types of usage, numbers of people using it, public safety, parking, and runoff issues in an environmentally sensitive wetland area, to name just a few, have not been addressed satisfactorily. What answers have been given have been vague rather than specific. Mr. Bitar can call this the Readfield Country Club, Music and Arts Coalition, Helen's Barn, the Safe Space Meeting House, the Dewdrop Inn, or the Number 10 Saloon. They are all just different names for the same business venture that is not allowed under the guiding regulations of the land use ordinance. I urge you to reject this permit application. I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Will. Are there questions from planning board members for Will? Thank you very much. Are there other abutters to the property that would like to speak this evening?
My name is Melanie Ann Liss. I live right next door and my border is the stream. However, depending on what diameter circle you're drawing, I may or may not be considered an abutter, even though there is nothing between my property and the property at 26 Millstream Road. In trying to honor the town of Readfield's wishes, I am going to just mention the few things that have already been mentioned, but not elaborate on them. I agree 100% with Mr. Will Harris and would like to remind everyone of a quote of, you know, that President Abraham Lincoln, some old guy back there? One man's rights end where another man's begin. Mine began at that stream. I also agree with the town manager in this case. Now, I will say I am not fully versed in exactly what are the procedural and regulatory standards and requirements that are required for this particular type of application. So please forgive me if I go off on that, and you may certainly tell me that is not part of the procedural regulational standards that we are trying to meet with this application. The noise ending by 9:30? Well, let me see. I've actually had to call in the wee hours of the night because of noise complaints over the last several years. Prior to COVID stopped that with that particular property. Vandalism has occurred during their events. Trespassing occurs on my property quite a bit because there is not significant parking in that area. So they park in the town office, which they're allowed to do. Then they walk across my front yard, sometimes through my yard, thinking the trail that goes across is in my yard. It's actually one house over past Mr. Knox's yard. Anytime there's an event over there, I have significant trash on my property. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. That seems to be when I have a lot of people going across my property. Personally, for those of you who want to know, I don't want the noise of anybody having free croissants or anything on Sunday morning. I want to be able to sleep until I feel like getting up. Now, there have been consistent misrepresentations, such as the final verdict on this will be made and announced at 8:30 tomorrow night. I am concerned about the property values which have been mentioned. I'm concerned about the regulations of the land use. I'm also concerned about this being listed as something that's part of a nonprofit. I'm concerned because I don't see evidence of this particular nonprofit showing where they are holding other events at public spaces, like our beach that I know can be rented out, our schools, other businesses. I know for a fact that this building that we're in right now, you can apply to use it for various uses. And certainly, I feel our town, especially after the last things they supported at Readfield Heritage Day, supporting the library, and would be happy to support an event that is encouraging inclusivity and frankly opening up more opportunities for our community. There's no reason why a legit nonprofit couldn't be holding events even if they don't have a location. In fact, many nonprofits hold events to raise funds and political support for their organizations, to find locations. I'm concerned about emergency responses and how that's going to be impacted. I'm concerned about the roads and the parking. I'm actually, at this point in time, concerned about what kind of COVID protocols are going to be put in place. I have been vaccinated, but I wear a mask because I'm immunocompromised. I don't hear any concerns about that, which is a current issue. Again, I am in support of the town manager's position, Mr. Harris's position, and the position that has been expressed to me by other abutters who unfortunately are not here this evening. I would like to
Liz,
be
I would
kept
ask you to
informed,
wrap
and
up,
I'm sorry.
please.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Planning board members, do you have questions for Ms. Liz? Okay, thank you very much. Are there other abutters who would like to provide comment? If not, the next name I have on the list is Rexford Tychin? Okay.
So I'm new to Readfield since 2018. I live on Rat Mill Hill Road. And what this comes down to for me is the trust issue we're having with the person that's putting in this request. Since this all began, my mailbox has been inundated with stuff being sent from this gentleman despite my request to have it stopped. He has shown up at my house, knocking on my door regarding prior to us going to make votes about this issue. Those things alone, plus many things that just came out to me from this gentleman in this evening, are questionable about what the intended use of this property actually is, and can we really trust that that's what that use is going to be? And for me, the answer to that is no, I cannot trust that because of the actual property. I was not able to tour it, but my partner was able to tour the property, and the property is established as the cooking facilities, everything that are in there do not fit what the use is saying it's going to be used. And so when it comes down to the integrity of what we're being asked to approve, I think the planning board really needs to take that into consideration and look at the history of this property and what is being asked of us, because I do not think it's genuine in nature. Thank you.
Questions, planning board members? Okay, thank you very much. Jason Hall.
Hi, I'm Jason Hall. As Rex said, we're new to Readfield as of 2018. I did have the opportunity to see the site yesterday. A couple of the concerns that I had, the parking doesn't look to be 35 spaces. It's in an odd position. I also didn't see any accommodations for any type of handicap accessibility. But on a personal note, one of the reasons that Rex and I chose to move to Readfield was the safety and the protection of living in a rural community. On Rat Mill Hill Road, we don't have any neighbors. And I hope that you folks will protect what we have here in Readfield. I don't want to wake up one morning and find that the abutting property has been sold and somebody's going to put a concert hall in. Again, that's one of the reasons we moved here in the first place, for the protections that we have here in Readfield. And as this lady said, there are plenty of opportunities to have community functions, and I applaud the concept of inclusivity and creating safe spaces for folks, but there are already places that we can do that without using a property that is so clearly not appropriate for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Planning board members, any questions?
Could you announce for the Zoom people if they want to speak?
I'd mention again that if you're participating via Zoom and wish to speak, you need to send an email to the code enforcement officer with your name and address, and we'll add you to the list. And again, that address is ceo@readfieldmaine.org. ceo@readfieldmaine.org. Next up, Matt Nazar.
Good evening, board. My name is Matt Nazar. I want to apologize first for being a little nervous this evening. I've been made out to be the devil in this particular community over the last couple of years. And it's, I usually spend a lot of time speaking before public meetings. I'm a public official in another community, and I have no problem speaking in front of public meetings, in public groups, but as a private citizen, it's a whole different story. And I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen, and I am quite nervous, which is very unusual for me, and I apologize for that. Needless to say, I'm not in a safe space tonight because of how I've been attacked unfairly, in my opinion. And unfortunately, the applicant's attorney has concluded that my expression of my anxiety in my testimony to you in writing was an attempt to disparage him, and feels that apparently my anxiety is somehow an attack on him. And I apologize for that, Mr. Davis. That's not the case. So I guess what I'd like to say this evening is that I agree wholeheartedly with the town manager. I agree wholeheartedly with the other testimony that I've heard this evening. And I'm sorry, I haven't been this nervous in front of a group in decades. This particular project, I agree, does not belong here. I would encourage the planning board to take a look at the Rural Resource Shoreland Zoning District, or the Resource Protection Shoreland Zoning District. I believe that a portion of this project is actually in the Resource Protection Zone. That's an overlay zone. It's a shoreland zoning project zone in your community, in my community. I've been here 22 years. And as a result, this particular use would not be allowed in that zone. A portion of the front building, the old house, I believe, is actually in that zone. And if this particular use is not allowed at a minimum in that shoreland zone, then you have, it's your duty, I think, to find that the project can't move forward, because I don't think there's any realistic way that you can divide half a building with particular uses. I also agree that my concern has a lot to do with some of the things that were discussed earlier with respect to parking and public safety, with respect to traffic. I'm very concerned about the condition of the road, the existing Millstream Road, and the fact that if this applicant does get an approval, and as a condition of approval, that the planning board does not require that the road be reconstructed in order to accommodate this use, that within a couple of years, perhaps as many as 5, the town will be asked to reconstruct that road, because the users of this particular facility will not have a safe place to be able to go to and from the parking spaces, to be able to move in the dark along the area. I've provided you with photographs of the way this particular road looks in the middle of winter. Those pictures, one was from December 30th, 2018, and the other one was from March 2nd, 2019. I took the pictures that winter because that was the summer after the owner of the property decided to hold concerts on his own, and I was concerned that it was going to result in some sort of future application, which we now have here in front of us. So that's why I provided that to you. I also provided you with a topographic map that shows that some of the comments that have been made in the past meetings about how topography is going to block the sound that might be emanating from the property towards my home and towards Old Kent's Hill Road does not exist. There is not a hill between us and this particular project. There is a hill between this particular project and Giles Road. There is a fairly sizable knoll that is directly behind the barn that does shield Giles Road. It does not shield Old Kent's Hill Road. I'm a good solid 40 feet above this particular property, and the sound comes right up to my home. And I think the last thing that I'll mention, let me just make sure on my notes here that I've hit them. I would suggest that the planning board needs to have a good idea of how many people this particular building can hold per the fire marshal's standards. What is the actual capacity of the building? If the board is going to approve this, what's the capacity of the building? And therefore, what are the parking needs that are going to be necessary in order to accommodate the capacity of the building? You have to assume that at least some of the time, the building is going to be filled. You're going to have a wedding that's going to occur there. You're going to have some other community function that's going to have whatever the capacity of that building is. And you're going to need the parking to be able to deal with it. If not, you're going to have people parking out on Route 41, and you're going to have the traffic concerns as expressed by the town manager. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is, the applicant talked about the fact that if there was something unusual that came up, they'd come back to the town and ask permission. The board knows this is the one bite at the apple the town has. If you guys approve this, whatever your conditions of approval are your conditions of approval. That's it. No one has to come back and ask additional permission from you. So take your time and get this right if you're going to move forward with approval. I don't think that it can be approved, and I think that it should be denied based on the comments that you heard from the manager. But if you do get to approval, take your time and be careful and make sure you have an airtight decision.
Thank you, Matt. Questions from the board? Thank you. Phil Tedrick.
Hello, my name is Phil Tedrick. I've been a Readfield resident for somewhere around 25 years. I can say that most of that 25 years, I've been a happy and proud Readfield resident. More recently, I've been a sad and embarrassed Readfield resident. The property under discussion tonight was conceived as a wonderful gift to our community. And that wonderful gift was rejected. And I'm well aware of the history and the rationalizations, but the bottom line is that it was conceived as a wonderful and generous gift to this community. And the representatives of the community rejected it. I have listened to the articulate speakers that have spoken so far, and I understand their reservations. I noticed the phrase being entitled to the quiet enjoyment of my property. Human beings, as well as non-human entities, make noise. In my location of my home, the most noticeable noise is motorboats on the lake. High-powered motorboats and noisy motorboats. I have not seen fit to whine about it. I might prefer music and might consider myself lucky if I heard music coming from an abutting property. I would encourage the board to think seriously about having a second opportunity to do the right thing and approve the application before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tedrick. Board members, questions? Jerry Bly? Is there anyone here in the room that I've missed that would like to speak? I think I've gone through.
John, the last one I gave you. John.
Oh, okay. I thought this was a Zoom list.
We haven't gotten any Zoom list.
Okay, okay. Okay, please.
Hey, everybody. How are you? Beautiful Maine summer day. I'm John. Nice to see you. Hi, Paula. Community. So the future, a gift, right? An opportunity to open up a door for the children and the kids and the future of this community. I look around, I see my colleagues here. I don't see any kids. I don't see the future. I see people being guarded and scared. I see a lot of people afraid someone's gonna play music. Someone's gonna walk down the path. Maybe they'll be singing a song or something. I don't know. They'd be disturbing your peace and your zen. But zen and peace comes in the chaos. When there's a pandemic and the world's falling apart, you find peace in the chaos. And you can't be afraid. We need to build a situation, a safe space. We need a safe space. You know, whether you love Bob or hate him, you love the Emporium and all the beautiful music and all the things he created there. If you've been to the Emporium, you're gonna see Emporium 2.0 magic. That's what it's gonna be. You're not gonna see loud rock and roll music and punk rock. It's not that. It's Bob the Tar.
Excuse me, could I ask you to
Concert
speak into
music.
the mic, please? So
I'm talking to the people. Yes, yes, Paula.
the
Thank you.
Zoom participants can
Thank you.
also hear.
I'm in the flow, but the thing is artists in music, in inspiration comes from energy and youth and health. And I don't want to judge this room, but I feel like you guys are scared. You're afraid of what was happened there. He took this, probably one of the oldest buildings in Readfield, and he restored it, and he added this amazing space. And what's going to happen there? People are going to come. They're going to feel safe. They're going to have community. We're going to create music, beautiful music. People are going to sing. They're going to sing. And they're going to create art. And that's what it's going to be. The fear that there's going to be some like punk rock concert there or some crazy thing, that's not reality. That's fear. What's going to happen is there's going to be music and there's going to be art. And the kids, we're all middle-aged people. Everybody in this room, y'all old, gray hair, I'm worried, I'm scared. I came here because I wanted to die and go. I just want quiet when I die. It's not about us. It's not about you. And I respect everyone on this planning board. It's about the kids in the future and the teenagers, the teenage kid that's like, oh, I want to kill myself. And he goes over there and he's jamming with some 40-year-old guy who knows how to play guitar or he's at some cool thing. That's what happens at these safe spaces, Paula. And you guys know it. And I know there's zoning and regulations and all this stuff, but you have the power, the opportunity to open your heart and not the fear and worry that these, I don't even count these people are gonna not whatever. It's about how much time do I have left?
I would ask you to wrap up.
I will
please.
wrap it up. Passion, art, music, food. Bob has a track record. In Helen, they were the center of Readfield for the energy of the art, the music, and the food. It's gone. And all I've heard in this room tonight is fear. Fear of what's going to happen. What about what can happen? You know, the music, the sound. It's not going to be awful sound. It's going to be beautiful. You know, and we can't judge each other. And if you're a neighbor and you live next door, and it's like, so what? You hear some great music on the weekend. So I'll wrap it up. And I just want to say, as a young person with lots of energy and hope and optimism for the future. It's sad because I see this town dying, literally, because you guys are shutting down this huge opportunity of possibility. And that's what that building is. And a man and his wife and their dream, they took their resources, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they put it into there with hope. And so if you vote against this, you're voting against hope, and you're voting against the future. And you're voting with the people that are like, oh, I just want to be quiet.
I need to ask you.
That's what you're voting
to
against.
complete
So
your
you can
comments,
vote for the
please.
future and the kids and the little kids, or you can vote for the people that are scared. And I know that upset you, and thank you, Paula, for listening to my words, but I would plead with you as a person of means and wants to invest in this town. No one's going to invest in this town except the retirees. We're talking about the kids who live here, Maine kids, right? And I'm sorry if there's anger and tone in my voice because this is passionate to me.
Thank you very much.
This is
for your
it, man.
comments.
This is
You
your
need to-
opportunity.
You need to wrap up, please.
Thank you,
And-
Paula. Thank you.
Right. Thank you
I
for your
appreciate you and I
comments. We
respect you.
appreciate it. Questions from the board?
Future, you gotta vote for the kids,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you very much.
This is not about these people. It's about the kids.
It's about everyone. Thank you very much.
That
for
is
your
right.
comments.
It's about everyone. All right. I love Readfield. It's an amazing town. It's
All
gonna
right,
get better.
Next speaker, Elliot Sandler, please.
Don't be scared. Be strong, be strong.
You don't want to speak? Okay. All right.
Love y'all.
My name is Elliot Sandler. I've been a Readfield resident for 40 years. I know Bob. And I know some of the planning board members, our town manager. I had an opportunity for the very first time, or actually the second time, to go to the property in question last night. I've been in show business for almost 60 years. What is presented in front of you is a wonderful opportunity if it can be done right. I don't know all the particulars here. I've been away for about 6 months, so I don't know all the particulars here, but I would urge the board to consider this perhaps with restrictions. And I don't know, Paula, if the board can do restrictions, but if the board can do restrictions, is perhaps a conditional something to see what would happen. Certainly, this young lady and Will, they're abutters. What they have to say, I think, is very important. Bob is also their neighbor, and a neighbor should be a friend. I would hope that we could all get along, maybe find some conditions that we could put on this thing to see if it works or not, and then make some kind of decision once we know where the noise goes, if there is any, where the people park, if they do park, if the people come at all. I don't know. But it's better to negotiate than it is to aggravate. And I just would hope that perhaps in your agreeing to the application or disagreeing with the application, that there can become some kind of medium to it. It's a heck of a gift if it was used the right way. I'm not sure it can be used the right way. I'm not sure it is the right thing. But I think that if you put condition on it, you think well about the conditions, put it on, and then see what happens. You can come back in a year and say, yeah, this works, or this really was a terrible idea. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board? Thank you. The last name I have is Sean Keegan. Sean, did you want to speak? Okay. Okay. Is there anyone else, either in the room or participating via Zoom, that would like to speak and has not had an opportunity? Okay, I see none. So to wrap up, I would just repeat a few of the points I made at the beginning of the hearing. Primarily that the board will not be deliberating or making a decision this evening. We do need the time to thoughtfully consider all of the comment, the information that's been submitted on this application, and it is voluminous. And so our plan at this point is to bring the application up again, likely at a regularly scheduled meeting in September, but we will be discussing that and we'll formally notice that when we do plan to schedule it for discussion. I want to thank you all very much for participating tonight. We really appreciate your comments, and thank you very much for taking the time to come out and join us. It's extremely helpful in our process, and we do appreciate it very, very much. So if anyone has a question about process or where we're going from this point, I'd be happy to entertain that. Sir?
I have a question pertaining to the written comments.
Yes.
That the board would consider. Did you say September 5th?
September, when I looked at the calendar, it is Labor Day weekend, and the 7th of September is the Tuesday following that weekend. And so the deadline that will be established is September 7th, right. Tuesday at 5 p.m.
And where are those?
And those you can send to the code enforcement officer to his email, which is ceo@readfieldmaine.org.
Thank you.
Paula? Paula?
Jack? Yes.
There's two issues that came up that I thought we could ask maybe the code enforcement officer or the applicant to provide further information on. One was whether a portion of the property is in the resource protection zone or not. I don't know the answer to that. And the second was, we had requested earlier the dimensions of the parking area and how it was figured out that it would fit 35 vehicles based on our ordinance and based on the size of the lot. And we never received that, I don't think.
Chip, my recollection is that we did not receive anything further about the parking area. Is that correct?
We did not. We did receive comments from two people on the issue of whether parking on Route 41/17 would be acceptable.
And I would mention too that Chip, our code enforcement officer, had put together some maps with distances. So on the walls, there are a couple of maps with circles that indicate distances from this particular property to other locations. And those are available if they are of interest to you to look at.
So as far as the parking lot, if the applicant's not going to submit anything more, that's fine. I mean, that's their decision. As far as the resource protection zone, is there a way that code enforcement officer can determine whether any part of the building is in the resource protection zone?
I think we can take out the zoning map indicates the extent of that resource protection zone pretty clearly. I do not recall if any of the site plans had that zoning indicated on it or not. I was almost thinking that it did. I think I saw something. So maybe, Chip, you could look at the site plans we have to see if any of them overlay those zones.
I will. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I have a question.
Bill.
Reference was made by one of the members of the public to a consent decree
Yes.
in 2017. I'd like to see a copy of that consent decree, and also might suggest that the Readfield attorney review that consent decree and to make sure that we're not doing anything to violate something that's already been.
Either Eric or Chip, I don't know which of you would have most immediate access to a copy of the decree, and if you could provide that to the planning board members.
Absolutely, we'll take care of that. I believe they've actually already seen a copy of it recently because it was a discussion point that was brought up. But I don't believe it's limiting in that it does prohibit the single-family use unless the issue is brought back to the planning board or the single-family residential use status is brought back to the planning board. I recall we had a conversation about that. I'll double check on the status of that and get confirmation for the planning board. But my belief at this point is that it is not binding in that a change is allowed if a change is proposed to the planning board, which I believe is what's happening right now. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Any other procedural questions that anyone has? Or questions from the planning board?
Not tonight.
Chip?
According to the zoning map, there is a piece of the main property that the barn and the house are on, that also borders Millstream Road as part of the resource protection zone.
So perhaps you could pull that particular plan out and distribute it to planning board members.
I will do that.
Thank you. Okay. There is nothing else. I thank you all again very much, and I will adjourn the meeting for this evening.